The hypersexualization of kids in our modern societies is a problem. The fact that videos like this are material that's stressing the same points are being disliked and ridiculed is also a concern. The hypersexualization of society, period, is responsible for sex-addicted drones and plenty of broken homes. Destruction of the general family unit has been achieved by persistently blending sex, love, promiscuity, and cheating in all media formats.
From the day that someone is born, they are inundated with advertisements, trying to sell false emotion or lifestyle, as well as unrealistic and mostly inappropriate media messages. Children have become the main target of major corporations seeking to gain loyal customers for life. Not only that, but you could hardly find TV shows or movies without sex blatantly or subliminally. We as girls are being portrayed as objects while being taught to act as such. We are being taught to accept 6-year-olds as sexy on TV shows like Toddlers and Tiaras, where the children dress like hookers from Pretty Woman and pop culture occult icons, not to mention the swimsuit modeling. These girls are going to be damaged for life.
The sexiness concern is being, moved younger and younger and younger, and there's even research that shows that 6-year-old girls are talking about wanting to be hot and wanting to be sexy. It's really normal now for there to be this little discourse, this little conversation that you see among the girls that are sort of playing, and you could say that Barbie is sort of a little kernel of a little core of that sort of grew and grew and grew. But the Barbies that were played with in 1965 were not always about how do I make myself sexy, and I look really hot in this, and yeah, you do, and let's go out and party, and that's a sort of play script that you didn't see little kids having before, and they have it now.
I am disturbed about the idea of girls being sexy and then getting to that line of sex. And so they're asked to be very, very sexualized at younger and younger ages, yet then they don't quite know what to do with what they've been given. So here I am, a little sexual object, yet I don't really know a whole lot about sex, and I'm supposed to be sexy for the boy, yet I don't quite know why I want to do that. And so it's really disturbing to me because these kids are getting into things that are pushing them over a line that they're not ready for, when they actually really should be out playing and they should be having fun and not thinking about this. But our world is pushing them into being sexual objects at younger and younger.
Is absolutely despicable. Children need to be protected, not thrown to the wolves. How is this not child abuse on behalf of the parents? What kind of adult puts their young, vulnerable, and trusting son on display in this manner? As a mother myself, this makes me ill. This is child exploitation. They're being paraded out for attention, likely by their sicko mothers that have Munchausen's by proxy.
Across the country, child drag queens are a growing phenomenon. Desmond is Amazing is an 11-year-old boy who has received glowing media attention despite clear and convincing evidence that his parents are financially profiting from his exploitation. How on earth does an 11-year-old decide to be a drag queen without heavy adult manipulation? These child drag queens do suggestive shows in front of adult men in bars as the men sip their drinks and watch. Where is Child Protection Services?
I have found in my research in preparation for this court and all of the work that will follow that most organizations that end up being used to prey on children, Oxfam is a recent example, all of the United Nations organizations, the Boy Scouts of America, all of the child services agencies across the United States of America, they did not start out as organizations to prey on children, but they attract pedophiles. And ultimately, pedophiles end up rising in the ranks and controlling those organizations, so that an organization that initially started out in the service of children becomes an organization that is in fact hunting children.
Now I want you all to look at the man on the left here. Really look at him. If you grew up in the 80s and 90s, you might recognize him to be Michael Ellig. He was a club promoter in New York City and even made some TV appearances. He started this thing called Club Kids, which he described as part drag, part clown, and part infantilism. Now, this guy in general is, excuse my language, but a complete fucking whack job. He was hooked on drugs for the majority of his life, and he was reported to frequently drug people's drinks without their knowledge. but that's not even close to what he's known for. In 1996, Michael and a former club kid, Angel Melendez, got into an altercation about drugs and money. Michael ended up hitting him on the head with a hammer until he was unconscious and allegedly injected Drano into his veins. After Angel died a slow and painful death, Michael and his roommate dismembered the body in the bathtub and dumped it in the Hudson River. They got away with it for a couple of weeks, but Michael started bragging about the murder as a ploy for attention. The police were notified and Michael and his partner were sentenced to 10 to 20 years in jail. Michael was released from prison in 2014. That is Michael Ehrlich, sitting next to this 11-year-old boy without his parents in sight. Behind them you can see a painting of a little girl jumping rope with the word rohypnol. For those of you who don't know, that's the date rape drug. It makes you tired and out of it and typically renders you unconscious, so it's easy for people to sexually violate you. As it turns out, ketamine and rohypnol were reported to be Michael's favorite drugs of use.
To a world where drag kids actually exist.
And people do ketamine on a couch. Do you not just do that? What?
Desmond is Amazing's mother just recently complained about pedophiles sexualizing her son. Like you didn't see this coming, lady. Your child was videotaped dressed as Gwen Stefani taking money on a stage at a gay club. What did you think was going to happen? He also appeared in a YouTube video with convicted killer Michael Ehrlich talking about ketamine and with a rohypnol painting behind him. You know, the date rape drug? Who knows what has happened to Desmond? It is tragic, and yet the mother doesn't get charged with child abuse, and she continues to parade her victim son around like a show pony.
Now, does anybody in this room know how to twerk? Alright, well, it's quite important to the story, so I will just give you a very quick demonstration. All you need to do is you just stand with your feet sort of shoulder width apart, like so. Okay, and I'll show you at the side so you get a better view. And you crouch down into this sort of position here, so your bum's sticking out. I hope you're taking this all in. And then you just move your bum up and down like that, and that's twerking. Now,
I'm so sick of this shit, honestly. Let's call it what it really is. Grooming under the guise of tolerance. And naive people who want to virtue signal their moral superiority are falling for it hook, line, and sinker. Don't believe me? Then why are so many of these storytime drag queens pedophiles with criminal histories of sexually abusing children?
Be Who You Are by Todd Parr. Be who you are. Be old. Be young. Be a different color.
For the most evil invention in the world contest, I invented a child molesting robot. What you do is you start by building a regular robot, then you molest it and note that it continues the cycle.
You're 7 years old and someone is stroking your penis. It feels good. Right. Even though you don't have a name for what that is, it feels good. And when I first said this years ago, people were like, you're crazy, because everybody wants to believe it's like sexual assault and you're being thrown up against the wall and you're being raped.
Plus the last 4 inches of that phone, and that'll do it. Yeah, oh, yes, okay. That'll be our secret then. No, not on radio. He was so eager to tell me when his birthday was, and he was going to be 15 in less than a month on the 1st of December. And this is what life is about. This is what real life is about. I would say that he was in bloom, and that's it. The flower is responding to warmth. That is, I as a human being am bathing him in a certain kind of celestial warmth, and he feels that, and he responds to that, and he thinks, oh, how nice, how wonderful that there's someone there who is appreciating what I am and who I am.
Okay, one more time.
The influence of television is certainly far, far greater than the influence of traditional Christianity.
The name Hollywood was chosen on purpose. Do you understand? It wasn't an accident. Holly wands are often used in magic concerning sleep. Are you listening? I said concerning sleep. Does anybody know what happens to somebody when they watch television for about 10 minutes? Your mind shuts down and you're susceptible to subliminal messages. You start to pick up subliminal messages. Oh, they don't use subliminal message, really? Because I got 35 pictures I can show you right now of Disney characters that they put all that smut in those movies. Children's movies. Pornography. Right in the children's movies. Say, no, they don't do that. Oh, yes, they do. Oh, yes, they do. In the most innocent ones you can find.
A report by BBC News found these characters have been put into YouTube videos with adult themes, animated violence, and graphic humor. Pages like Toys and Funny Kids Surprise Eggs generate millions of views and feature official-looking images of Peppa Pig, Doc McStuffins, and Cookie Monster. But with disturbing titles like Spider-Man Plays with Scissors, Bloody Elsa, Frozen Elsa's arm is broken by Spider-Man, and Naked Hulk loses his pants, these are not good for children.
First, the elite appear to be seeking to infect local and provincial law enforcement officers with a taste for pedophilia. There appears to be a very deliberate attempt to push this interest in pedophile movies, including movies that include bestiality.
Hey, can I share something with you that the top 100 movies that you watch are full of Illuminati signs? Do you know that every single movie that you've ever watched has the all-seeing eye in it everywhere? Now, why would it have that? Are you telling me that even Goofy and Mickey Mouse and all? Oh man, they're everywhere. I could show you a picture right now in one of the movies, in one of the little cartoons that says "Ask about Illuminati" right there. Don't get mad at the message or the messenger. Make sure you get mad at the devil for fooling you. Remember, we're God's children here. We hold up the truth. And if it's truth, then we get the error out of our lives. We don't care what the devil, we don't care what the world thinks, we don't care what our family thinks. We get it out of our lives.
Disgusting. She has to even pull him away. And him is still in a fucking daze because he's probably coked out and doesn't realize that he's fucking groping his own daughter in public. You disgusting animal.
So if you didn't already know, Katy Perry is one of these celebrities that is fully sold out to the satanic system, and she's used constantly. We judge trees by their fruit. And this person's fruit is foul. Not only blatantly pushing Satanism, satanic ideas, but she also promotes perversion and extreme sexuality to children. So don't we find this interesting that this particular performer, who is completely sold out to the satanic system, gets to meet with the Pope, gets to go to the Vatican. And yet here's another classic example. This is Lady Gaga with, dare I say, one of the most popular witches in the Hollywood system, even the political system, Marina Abramovic. If you're not familiar with Lady Gaga and all of her Illuminati symbolism and satanic public rituals she's done on stage for years now, you should look into that and then ask yourself, how is it that this particular performer gets to have an audience with 5 of our presidents? So we can see through these satanic performers alone, these satanic sellouts, this connection with the Vatican, now this connection with the presidents. I'm hoping this picture is becoming a lot more clear to you now.
I am on record as a former CIA operations officer as saying that our 1,000 bases overseas are not there for national defense. They're there to serve as lily pads for the smuggling of guns, gold, cash, drugs, and small children. The totality of the children disappearing worldwide is toward 8 million people. Toward 8 million children. In the United States of America, the acknowledged number, not counting the children being bred without birth certificates, not counting the children being imported without documentation is between 600 and 800,000 a year. Now imagine Africa and East Asia and all these other locations.
We are here crying for help. There are children screaming to be heard. If you don't hear those children scream, who will?
£60 million I saw was being spaffed up the wall on, some investigation into historic child abuse and all this kind of thing. I mean, what on earth is that going to do to protect the public now?
Governments are letting us all down. And I absolutely agree with the commissioner who brings forward the need to restore the sovereignty of we the people, because governments have become not only bureaucratized, but they are now the servants of the deep state, of the banks. And if I may, the deep state is not the same as the shadow government. As I say, every organization is 90% good people trapped in a bad system. It's the highest 10% that is generally the rogue killer element. One of the problems with computers is they're too easily manipulated. In the United States of America, elections are decided before the first vote is cast. The electronic voting machines are essentially fraudulent machines, just as computers can record a fraudulent judgment that sticks with you forever, or make a child vanish. Pedophilia is how the deep state recruits and controls people. It is also the Achilles heel of the deep state. I believe that once the public realizes that the government is not protecting their children at a scale of vulnerability that we can articulate, then everything else about the government is called into question.
Over recent days, the Daily Mail has splashed its front pages about the Labour deputy leader, her husband, Shadow Minister Jack Dromey, and the former Labour Health Secretary Patricia Hewitt. All three worked for the National Council for Civil Liberties in the 1970s and 80s. The Council, now known as the human rights organisation Liberty, was linked to the Paedophile Information Exchange, a group which campaigned for paedophiles' rights. It even argued to lower the age of consent to 10. Ms Harman became the legal officer at the NCCL in 1978, and her name appears on documents submitted to the Home Office that argued that pictures of naked children should not be banned as indecent unless it could be proved that the child had been harmed.
All right, Harman, you were the legal officer for several years at the National Council for Civil Liberties, which was affiliated to the Paedophile Information Exchange. Why was it acceptable even to have an affiliation? They didn't try to hide what they were. The title of the group was the Paedophile Information Exchange. Why was it okay for them even to have any link with the group you worked for? At the time when you were the legal officer there, you wrote in a briefing paper to MPs, and we have it here, that prosecutions in relation to child protection and photography should only proceed if you can prove that children were actually harmed. Can you see why people might raise an eyebrow? Was the affiliation between the two groups a mistake?
Well, NCCL takes money from any organisation which was a lawful organisation and any individual.
You're happy that your employer for 4 years took membership money from a group that was overtly campaigning for the rights of paedophiles. That wasn't a mistake. That's what you're saying.
You know, I stand by what I was doing at NCCL, and I stand by what I've done all the way through.
We are now looking at a tape that has been hidden for many years by the government, secret services, whoever, of Leon Britton abusing young boys. So it isn't just Tony Blair's government, it's Margaret Thatcher's government. And Leon Britton, I'll say it again, was a regular visitor to Elm Guest House at the same time as Gary Walker, who was heavily a leader of Sinn Féin and the IRA. While bombs were going off on the streets of this country, I'm sorry, I'm getting angry now, while bombs were going off on the streets in this country and people were being accused of this and that, while these two, our Home Secretary and the leader of Sinn Féin and the IRA, were messing about with children at Elm Guest House and worse. And we're now going into the detail of snuff movies. A witness I'm working with was asked if he knew anything about a snuff movie where a young child was decapitated. So it's going a lot deeper, Lou, and I asked Nick Clegg that question 4 years ago, Lou.
Yeah. Bill, can we just quickly go on? What happened on the BBC this morning? Because obviously I came straight into the studio and I've just been...
Keep the smiles up. Thumbs up. Nick, 4 years ago, I asked you, what were you going to do about institutional paedophile operating in this country now? Your reply to me, Nick, was, I don't know what you mean by institutional paedophile rings. Do you understand what I was talking about 4 years ago now, Nick, and stay in my eyes? About taxes, thanks.
And so when people say, oh, these victims are just coming forward to try and get some compensation, let me tell you, all the money in the world wouldn't. Sorry.
That's all right, Simon. I know it's really harrowing. Are you okay?
The Rochdale MP Simon Danchuk talking to our reporter Becky Milligan earlier.
Another story, and the Jimmy Savile sex scandal at the BBC and with the police is rumbling on. 7 times, apparently, the police let Jimmy Savile off. That's the headlines of many of the newspapers today. But this was raised on Wednesday by Tom Watson in the House of Commons at Prime Minister's Questions. And if you listen carefully, you can hear a lot of the Conservative people at the very beginning, when Tom Watson stands up to speak, making sort of animal noises at him. But anyway, let's hear what he had to say.
Watson. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The evidence file used to convict paedophile Peter Wrighton, if it still exists, contains clear intelligence of a widespread paedophile ring. One of its members boasts of his links to a senior aide of a former Prime Minister, who says he could smuggle indecent images of children from abroad. The leads were not followed up. But if the files still exist, I want to ensure that the Metropolitan Police secure the evidence, re-examine it, and investigate clear intelligence suggesting a powerful paedophile network linked to Parliament and Number 10.
Liberals have been saying for years that love is all that matters. But if you have nothing solid underlying that philosophy, if you don't connect your idea of love to righteousness, to wholesomeness, then you're going to see the worst kinds of depravity, group marriages, paedophilia, bestiality, and incest, because every one of those groups will simply say that theirs is also a valid kind of love.
Professor Alfred Kinsey was the father of the sexual revolution. From 1948 to 1956, he traveled the world, advising governments how to modernize antiquated sex laws. From Britain, where he advised the Wolfenden Committee on Homosexuality, to Europe and America, his advice was key to updating sexual attitudes.
Scientists that Epstein and the NXIVM cult were financing, and how that research, that MK Ultra research, ties into the Kinsey Institute and Alfred Kinsey. So here's the Kinsey Institute webpage. You can see this is what they promote. Now they are the ones pushing this transgender and fighting people who want to give any sort of guidance to our children that oppose pushing them deeper and deeper and deeper into sexual perversion. Alfred Kinsey was not a psychologist, had no degrees in psychology, was not a medical doctor or anything. He was an entomologist, the study of insects. That's who is the sex expert. that we have based our entire modern culture on.
In 1948, Kinsey published the first scientific study of what people do in bed. Sexual behavior in the human male took the world by storm. Unnoticed within it were the details of the sexual abuse of several hundred children.
What people to this day are not aware of were the methods he used to collect his data.
And I looked at the graphs that he provided, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34 tables, and I said, wait a minute, that's a 2-month-old baby. How does he know a 2-month-old baby did or did not have an orgasm? And then table 34, a 4-year-old child, 26 orgasms in 24 hours? That's an around-the-clock experiment.
Wow, that's torture.
That's torture, you bet.
One of Kinsey's most damaging and outrageous claims was that children were sexual from birth.
Alfred Kinsey took away my innocence that I didn't even know I had.
This woman, under the assumed name Esther White, says she is a direct victim of Dr. Alfred Kinsey's. Her grandfather, who went to college with Dr. Kinsey, helped Kinsey gather data on the sexual behaviors of children.
When I was about 3 or 4, my grandfather molested me. And I didn't understand. He was angry at me and said, don't you ever tell your grandmother or your mother. He was calling it lovemaking. I know now that it's molestation.
One of Kinsey's closest associates and co-authors, Wardell Pomeroy, in a sex publication stated, "We found many beautiful and mutually satisfying relationships between fathers and daughters." In another publication, Pomeroy claimed, "Incest between adults and younger children can prove to be a satisfying and enriching experience."
I was constantly afraid because I didn't like what was being done. It was something I had to do because I had to be an obedient child. But I didn't like doing it, and there were times I went into convulsions with excruciating pain in my back, spasms that hit like a knife in my back. But he wasn't paying any attention to me.
Esther remembers being questioned by Kinsey and members of his research team in her grandfather's home.
I was told that this was a very important meeting, and I was going to meet a very important man, and that he was going to ask me some questions, and that I was to answer them correctly. And the questions would be, are you happy with your family? Do you love your daddy? And as they were about to leave, my grandfather reminded Alfred Kinsey that, what about the check? And Mr. Kinsey said, oh, I almost forgot. I had the check made out to you and your son because I didn't know which way you would want to split it. I saw the check. I saw Alfred Kinsey hand that check to my grandfather.
And notice how this exactly matches the story that Kathy O'Brien came out with about how they recruit people for these MK Ultra programs and so many of the other MK Ultra whistleblowers. They often claim that they were abused as children by somebody in their family, and to escape prosecution, criminal prosecution, they were offered to enter this program. So the men wouldn't have to go to jail, and they would turn the children over. They'd hand their children over for these programs, these MK Ultra programs. And that's very similar to what Kinsey did, because clearly Kinsey was a precursor at the very least to the MK Ultra program, but more likely he was an arm of this MK Ultra sex abuse, child abuse, trauma-based mind control program. And that's exactly how he recruited all of these children for these projects. He went to known pedophiles, and instead of sending them to jail, he paid them to abuse the children as long as they enrolled their children in these programs at the university. Again, all of this was established and funded through grants by the Rockefellers. And this wasn't just going on in the United States. This was a worldwide effort, and it went hand in hand with the Nazis' experiments on the children.
I view Kinsey as one of the most treasonous
Americans in human history.
The charge of treason might sound a bit extreme, but the evidence shows that Kinsey's desire to document the most depraved sexual behavior led him to work with a man who seemed to personify evil itself, a Nazi pedophile named Dr. Fritz von Balusek.
Dr. von Balusek was a Nazi officer, Gestapo member of the Gestapo, one of the original Nazis, by the way, joined the party very early. He was in charge of a Polish town, and he was a pedophile.
Years after the war, von Balusek was arrested and put on trial for the murder of a 10-year-old girl who had been found naked and throttled on a piece of wasteland. The German authorities suspected von Balusek of the crime because the same girl had been listed among several hundred children he had raped, the details of which he had recorded in his pseudo-scientific diaries.
The judge, when they tried von Balusek, who was a very aristocratic fellow and had a very high place in the legal profession, when he finally came to trial, the judge said, I can't believe that you did this. You did this all for Kinsey, it would appear. And von Balusek replied, well, Kinsey himself asked me to do this.
But these headlines never hit the stands in the United States, and so the Kinsey propaganda campaign continued.
That the German papers at that very time were printing that Kinsey had been corresponding with this Nazi pedophile, and then it never made it to our newspapers, is clear indication of the control that the Rockefeller Foundation had, along with Indiana University. From all these people, he was able to tell us, quote, the truth about ourselves, the truth about what we were really doing behind closed doors. And he lied about our fathers, my father's generation and grandfathers. He lied about them because he projected onto them what he himself was doing.
What he was struggling with.
Yes.
It didn't take long for Kinsey to deceive the world with his fraudulent data, convincing us that we were sexually repressed and ignorant to the truth.
The activity that he says from people who were raped, there was no consequential damage to them, that it was fine. All of that then was just basic, just abhorrent, criminal, fraudulent research perpetrated by somebody who was a sexual pervert.
And a sexual psychopath. The man tortured himself to death sexually, for goodness sake. And yet he becomes the father of the sex education in the classroom now down in London, in the United States, certainly for decades. And there's no investigation. We tried to get him investigated in 1995, and now it must be done.
No.
We've had presidents apologizing for Tuskegee. We've had presidents apologizing for the LSD experiments on our soldiers. It is time we had apologies at the top level for the torture of thousands of children that became the thing that changed all of our laws and our ways of life.
Convincing us that we were sexually repressed and ignorant to the truth. Essentially, what Kinsey did was he changed our belief about ourselves. This change of belief naturally changed our behavior. Soon, Kinsey's ideas permeated everything in our society, from our legal system, reducing the penalty for sexual crimes, and legalizing abortion. The media, promoting his philosophy to the educational system, teaching children his views on sexuality. What's more, the pharmaceutical industry capitalized from the sexual revolution. We saw the emergence of STDs, sexual enhancers, and the morning after pill. The divorce rate soared along with sexual crime. As a people, we would never be the same again.
They're coming at us from 1,000 different angles through this mind control programming and creating us into their image. And this was his part. The sexual revolution was to show us that we are monsters, that really we're just repressed monsters. We're all sex offenders. All of the men should be in jail because they're all sexual predators. And he projected himself, because he was a monster, and he projected that onto humanity and said, well, I feel this way. You know, we saw a lot of the same thing with Freud. All of the people that the cabal lifts up in their science, that's what they do. They project their own evil onto everybody else.
Here's how it would likely happen. Left-leaning intellectuals will begin proposing with increasing boldness that paedophilia is just a natural proclivity. They will say that paedophiles are just a misunderstood, marginalised minority who deserve equality. Maybe a high-profile story will hit the news that will portray it in a sympathetic light. Perhaps a poster couple will emerge for the movement, and they'll tour the media channels saying that they're really in love and it's an arrangement that works for them. New studies will be done that conclude that since the Greeks and Romans and other ancient civilizations engaged in paedophilia, it must be natural. After it's been framed in this sympathetic way, the herd, not wanting to be seen as intolerant or bigoted or out of step with the groupthink, will then begin to support paedophile rights. Attitudes will relax, it will become more widely accepted in public, and anyone who opposes it will then be shouted down as an intolerant paedophobe. Those in power will come out as paedophiles themselves, and they'll change the laws to suit their appetites. It will pass from rightly being seen as an evil to being seen as an unfortunate disorder to just being seen as a legitimate expression of love. From an evil to an unfortunate disorder worthy of our sympathy to a legitimate expression of love. That's the sequence I believe that we're going to see pursued in the future. Now, the reason I'm making this video today is that just last week a friend of this ministry notified me that this is already starting to pick up pace, and they are indeed using these exact tactics to try to turn the tide of public opinion. Firstly, they're now actively vying to be included under the LGBT umbrella. Secondly, they're rebranding themselves with more politically correct speech, calling themselves not paedophiles anymore, but instead minor attracted persons. Thirdly, they've adopted a version of the rainbow flag with soft pastel colours. And then fourthly, liberal academics are indeed already trying to present them in a more sympathetic light. What follows are clips from a TED Talk given just last month at the University of Würzburg.
Let me tell you about Jonas. Jonas is 19 years old. He studies law in Munich. In his spare time, he likes to play soccer. Jonas has a secret which he thinks he cannot share with anyone, not even with his best friend or with his parents. He's just too afraid of anger, rejection, and repulsion. Jonas knows that he has to suppress his sexual drive for his entire life. And he also knows that there will never be a loving and fulfilling partnership that he can enter. Because Jonas is a pedophile. He's only attracted to female children between the ages of 6 and 12 years. It is on our responsibility to reflect and to overcome our negative feelings about pedophiles and to treat them with the same respect we treat other people with. At the moment, we live in a world that already excludes pedophiles because of their preference alone. Someone who is lonely and excluded from society has little to lose and is at much higher risk to commit a crime, like, for example, child sexual abuse. We can make Jonas feel that he stays a valuable member of our society, although he's a pedophile. Right now, most of us feel discomfort when we think about this scenario. And most of us feel discomfort when we think about pedophiles. But just like pedophiles, we are not responsible for our feelings. So generally speaking, anyone could be born a pedophile.
Who were part of the MK Ultra program started by Operation Paperclip. It's about how the priesthood, sacred societies, Freemasonry, and a satanic pedophilic agenda is widely used to control governments, religions, and local police to do their bidding. And others were sacrificed in the rituals. And she said for some reason a lot of the boys were sacrificed in rituals. Because every child that is abused by a government is one child too many. Every child that is abused by a trusted parent is one child too many. And every child that is abused by an authority figure in a church is one child too many. The good news is that this all ends when people start telling their story.
Kinsey's successor as director of the Kinsey Institute, Paul Gebhard, revealed that Alfred Kinsey was interested in having sex with men, children, and animals.
So, whatever happened to Kinsey? Well, this glorified psychopath eventually died of a slow and painful disease called orchitis, a lethal infection of the testicles due to years of brutal masochistic masturbation and other vile sexual acts. How ironic. The preacher of sexual liberation died from following his own message.
So here's Alfred Kinsey at the Satanist Crowley's house with the co-founder of the Church of Satan, Kenneth Anger. But anyway, this is Kenneth Anger, the co-founder of the Church of Satan, that worked with Alfred Kinsey.
Kinsey's willingness to work with the devil at one point seemed to take on a very literal meaning.
One of the interesting things I found several years ago in researching the Satanist Aleister Crowley was the influence that he has had on so many people here in the United States of America. And one of the men that he had influenced was Alfred Kinsey.
Kinsey began to travel abroad and study sexuality in foreign countries. In his book, Kinsey co-author Wardell Pomeroy wrote that Kinsey went looking for a prized item, the diaries of Aleister Crowley. Crowley was a famous and highly controversial British occultist in the early part of the 20th century. His sexual exploits and bizarre and sometimes deadly satanic rituals had been exposed in the London newspapers.
He also talked about taking a virgin and having sexual relations with her, and then upon a climax to actually murder her, cut her in 6 pieces, and put the names of the various demon gods on those 6 limbs, those 6 parts of her body.
Taking the name for the Antichrist in the Bible, Crowley called himself the Beast 666. His famous saying was, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," by which he justified all forms of immorality.
Love is love, love is all that matters, and no argument can stand against that in the postmodern era. You can counter-appeal to righteousness, you can counter-appeal to holiness, you can counter-appeal to truth and data and statistics, but none of it will matter. Our culture's decided that love has no connection to any of those other values, and these other values certainly don't hold as much weight. Therefore, if paedophiles can successfully convince the world that their proclivity is just a natural expression of love, that they were born that way, that they're just a poor, marginalized minority who just want to love, that's all they would need to do to turn the tide in their favor in this generation.
Is just another expression of that Talmud belief, that ancient Babylonian cult belief. And please do not confuse the Talmud as anything biblical. It's not the Torah. The Torah is biblical. The Talmud belongs to these people who call themselves Jews, the fake Jews. They're pretending to be Jews. Some people call them the Khazarian Mafia. It's probably more correct to say they started as the Sabbateans and then the Ashkenazis, and they were known as the Nazis. You know, they're also known as the Catholic hierarchy. It's all the same group. But anyway, here's that quick clip again from what it says in the Talmud, just to show that this didn't start with Kinsey. This did come from that ancient Babylonian cult, the same cult that practiced the sodomy, that had the sodomite prostitutes in the temples, which is where we get all of the cross-dressing and all of that. I laid it all out in these videos. The sodomy, the transvestites, the sex magic, even the pedophilia, all comes from this ancient cult, and it's well documented.
Bondmaid, one is guilty only in the case of natural connection, but not in the case of perverse connection. The Pharisees reasoned that rape in a perverted manner is outside the jurisdiction of the law. Normal rape, however, was punishable. In Babylon, sexual perversion of every kind had been a way of life for millenniums. The Pharisees were deeply influenced by such practices.
In 3 of the major treatises of the Talmud are found extensive passages which give legal endorsement to seduce and marry 3-year-old baby girls. In fact, many of the greatest rabbis of the Talmud, including Simeon ben Yochai, upheld this privilege.
The footnote to this passage says, "As tears come to the eye again and again, so does virginity come back to the little girl under 3 years." The same section confirms that sexual activity with small boys is in the same category. The intercourse of a small boy is not regarded as a sexual act.
And of course, because he's just one arm of this cabal, just one member of this cabal, all of the other parts rallied around him. So you had Hollywood making movies about him, making him out to be this hero and the sexual liberator. And likewise, the same in all of the textbooks, which are produced by the publishing houses, owned by these same media conglomerates. So everything that most people have heard has come through these mainstream outlets. So I don't think a lot of people really know the truth, that he's not a liberator. He was actually a homosexual, pedophile, sadomasochistic. He was very much into pain and Satanism. He actually died because of complications from torture that he did on himself, sexual torture that he inflicted on himself. Oh, and bestiality. He was in his pansexual. He's the author of this pansexual thing, this Miley Cyrus, what's his name, Ruby Rose, all this stuff that they're propagating now to our young people. This Kinsey, this monster, was the father of the pansexual movement, incest, bestiality, all of it. And he made a specific point to travel around and get all of the satanic documents from Aleister Crowley, because Crowley died about a year before his book came out. So he wasn't able to actually get all of Crowley's child abuse firsthand accounts. So he traveled and he got Crowley's satanic ritual and diaries so that he could also incorporate all of Crowley's Satanism and ritual abuse of children and other humans, so that he could incorporate all of that into his philosophy that now has created this world that we are living in. Sexually liberated, right? No, do as thou wilt is not liberation. This is Satanism.
The pansexual worldview that says all forms of sexual expression are equal and acceptable can be credited to Dr. Alfred C. Kinsey, the father of the sexual revolution. In Fox Searchlight's new biopic, simply titled Kinsey, he is portrayed as a tragic hero who fights for the sexual rights of a repressed society.
We knew Hollywood would airbrush Alfred Kinsey and make him out to be a pioneer of sexual liberation, instead of showing him for the fraud and aider and abetter of child molestation that he really was.
Did you know? We have more slaves today than ever before in history. Human trafficking is a $53 trillion enterprise that claims over 40 million victims worldwide. I am the typical girl next door, and yet I was trafficked for the first 15 years of my life by my own family. I was hidden in plain sight. I'm not hiding anymore. My name is Coco Berthmann, and I'm a human trafficking survivor. I won't stop until I bring honor to us all. I am trained with an organization called Adaptive Operations that performs rescue operations of human trafficking victims. So these are men who work in FBI, CIA, and police officers who volunteer their free time to put their lives in danger and bring freedom to those who are enslaved. Most people don't understand that we have more slaves today than ever before in history. The numbers are staggering. The suffering, unprecedented. We have over 40 million people worldwide held as human trafficking victims. I am focusing on sex trafficking since I'm a survivor. And I was trafficked in Germany. I wasn't trafficked somewhere in Eastern Europe or Asia or whatsoever. I was trafficked in a well-developed industrial country with a high educational level. I went to school. I went to dance classes. I went horseback riding. I had a normal life until the doors in my home closed. And I was raped 10 to 50 times a day. Not every day. It's seasonal. You know, while you're enjoying Christmas morning or your summer vacation that you've been longing for so long, I panicked because I knew the demand for child sex would increase because people started to have time on holidays. And who are the people who buy children for sex? These are not any scumbags. These are people we trust on a daily basis. Police officers, lawyers, doctors, teachers, people we trust our children to. And the reason why I'm so frustrated is that people don't understand what is going on. Trafficking is everywhere. It happens right in front of you and you don't even know. And it's the most lucrative crime around the world because unlike drugs, you can sell a human being multiple times. I was stinking lucky enough to get away at age 15. I should not be sitting here today. I should be a drug addict. I should be a prostitute. I should be dead. I should be living down there in the tunnels with all these other people. There are so many who need our help, and it's not fair that we all get to live a happy life and a blessed life and go to the movies and have fancy cars and complain about our sushi while there's people living out there who are being gang raped every day, who are being waterboarded, who are being tortured in ways that you can't even imagine.
Have been sexually violated by their Masonic relatives, often in Masonic temples. This is why the Masons believe that they will live forever. They think every time they defile a little child, they steal some of that child's youth. And if you notice, children who are sexually abused do age more rapidly because their innocence has been stolen.
We can't let this happen. This isn't progressive, this is regressive. This is return to a depraved world that Christianity once managed to reform for the better. As we turn our back on God, our society is falling apart, and surely everyone can see that.
Pansexuality includes every demonic perversion, like the pantheon. It means all of them. They mean exactly what they say in their writings. They want to move us, continue moving us in sexual perversion to accept all abuse. They want hell on earth. That's what externalization of the hierarchy means to them. Turn our world into hell. And you can clearly see they haven't stopped with the agendas that they've already normalized. And now we see all of our children, oh, I'm pansexual. Thank you, Ruby Rose, for helping me come out as pansexual. They're completely deceived. It's heartbreaking. So yeah, now it's the next thing, the next step is people marrying their animals. It's bestiality. So they give us all these cutesy stories normalizing how people are marrying their animals. Yep, intercourse with a cow, that's nice. So all different kinds of animals, all different countries. It's always worldwide, you'll notice. So it's India, Germany, Canada, you know, it's everywhere. They never just do it in the United States. But anyway, so they give us all these stories as they're working their way up to the next step, bestiality. It's the sexual revolution. And it's not just coming through the media. These cases are already being heard by the Supreme Court in other nations. So here we go. Most bestiality is legal, declares Canada's Supreme Court.
We have people in the United States of America that breed children in order to sell them. And when they are sold, they come without birth certificates, which means it's easier to kill them and have no one ask where they are. We're also importing children by the plane load. Again, children who have no documentation. It's not just child slavery or child sex abuse. It's also child torture because you have adrenalized blood. You have the whole blood drinking ceremony of the satanic world. It's also the use of children for harvesting body organs.
I eat little baby's ice cream. It keeps me young. It keeps me light on my feet.
Where actually eating people is too harsh for some to halt the aging process, they can just get a blood transfusion with the blood of a younger person for a mere $8,000.
It is an extraction from a piece of skin that came from a young person far, far away, and they somehow figured out how to extract.
It's foreskin from a Korean baby. That's what it is.
I suck baby's blood and put it on my face.
Okay.
Just joking, Hollywood world. No, I think that.
There are some who've speculated that the Rothschilds partook of infant body parts based on photos like this from the 1972 costume party they hosted. The broken doll can actually be symbolic of other things, MK Ultra for instance. It's not exactly proof. I do have to include this unrelated photo from the party because I just mentioned Audrey Hepburn and how the android Sophia is based on her. Audrey is wearing the MK Ultra birdcage symbolism on her head, and I do feel that Sophia is a bit of a mind warp on the public, as far as how advanced AI really is. Not to go off on another tangent. Everything is mind control these days, even the promotion of cannibalism to some extent. This socially engineered society purposely makes us all into sinners and even animals, thanks to institutions like Tavistock, which applauded infantile sexuality theories of Jewish Sigmund Freud. Again, this is all about redemption through sin. Why the elite might actually dine on infants isn't because they're reptilians or possessed thereof, necessarily anyway, but because it's claimed to provide longevity, or even stop the aging process. A Japanese horror movie called Dumplings revolves around this theme with an aging woman willing to eat fetus dumplings to prolong her life. Yes, there are Japanese Illuminati occultists. It's a small world order, after all. And while there are numerous movies about cannibalism, this part of the externalization of the occult hierarchy has been brought to the forefront by so-called artists like Marina Abramovich and her spirit cooking rituals disguised as art. Her elite events are attended by numerous celebrities like Lady Gaga, Debbie Harry of Blondie, Nicole Richie, Will Ferrell, Gwen Stefani, among many others, including corporate moguls. Most of us wouldn't know even half of them, but the accusations of satanic rituals as opposed to art are not unfounded. I already featured her golem ritual when talking about possessed dolls and AI. And most of her work is darkly themed because of her fascination with the occult at the very least. She's hosted more than one cannibalistic themed party. Drew Barrymore created a lot of buzz with her Netflix series, The Santa Clarita Diet, emphasizing the idea of longevity through cannibalism. It seems to be the main reason for doing it anyway. Turning it into comedy is just a way to make the sheeple comfortable with the idea until the hierarchy is completely externalized. It's the same with vampire and zombie movies, all related.
Our own big church, and we use it for sex, eating baby, drinking baby's blood. We sacrifice the baby.
We don't really know where those baby parts from Planned Parenthood go. There is also a lot of controversy surrounding the use of fetal cells as flavoring in foods, drinks, and whatever else they can be used for. The controversy lies in the fact that the cells are claimed to be replicated from an initial specimen, and also are basically a copy of a copy of a copy. They claim it's not real fetal tissue. There are many opponents to that claim. As there's no direct proof, take that as you will. It's in fast food, soft drinks, and so many other items available right off the store shelf. It may be that we were already being predictively programmed with cannibalism as an alternative for future food shortages in the 1973 movie with Charlton Heston, Soylent Green.
They're making our food out of people. Next thing, they'll be breeding us like cattle for food. You gotta tell them. You gotta tell them.
Promise, Tiger. I promise. I'll tell the exchange.
You tell everybody. Listen to me, Hatcher. You gotta tell them. Silent breed is people. We gotta stop them. Somehow!
It may be a practice that was already in place, if on a small scale, even back then. Clearly the elites are not above feeding us back to ourselves. When I talked about sacrifices in some of my older videos, I showed a staggering number of missing children as per the FBI missing persons database. Who knows what really happens to these kids? If they're taken as slaves, sacrifices, or food. In any case, the numbers far outweigh the adults who go missing. I'm not lingering here, so pause if you need time to look at the chart and see for yourself. Katy Perry recently released a video for her song Bon Appetit, which has MK Ultra Illuminati slave symbolism buried in it, as well as the obvious cannibalism overtones. She, like all other so-called artists, are owned and controlled by elite handlers who write their paychecks and purposely catapult them to stardom to be idolized and worshipped.
So I sold my soul to the devil.
Obviously, there was a lot of controversy with the video, which they knew would happen even before it was made, and was meant to create hysteria and outrage, shock value. But it's also that externalization of the hierarchy Alice Bailey wrote about, as well as redemption through sin, little by little. That's strange. Even stranger is the link between Dahmer and Tony Podesta of the Pizzagate scandal, where Podesta had an Arch of Agony statue proudly displayed in his home, which was identical to the position some of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims were found in. There is more to the occult symbolism than just cannibalism or torture, which you can read about in a linked article if you care. But as Pizzagate largely revolved around child trafficking and pedophilia, you have to wonder about the implications. And back to Katy Perry briefly, this is the pose she is making in the Bon Appetit video. No coincidence. Which explains the cannibal Colonel Ives' nearly superhuman qualities, which may indirectly refer to the drinking of adrenochrome in the blood of victims. Adrenochrome is an oxidation product of adrenaline and epinephrine, used as a drug to reduce bleeding, also claimed to be extracted from sacrificial murder victims when their adrenaline is raised through fear. It's referred to in Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, with Thompson played by Johnny Depp in the movie version, who is getting high off of it while his friend and attorney, Dr. Gonzo, tells him he got it from a, quote, Satanism freak.
Where'd you get this? What kind of monster client have you hooked up with this time?
Satanism freak.
There are many who contend this is in large part the reason for human sacrifices and the cannibalism itself, not only to get high, but to absorb the spirit and strength of the victim, especially when their adrenaline is raised.
I was blessed and be lucky enough to be sitting here today going to school to become a lawyer because this issue is a worldwide problem. It is the greatest human rights challenge of this century. We must not be blind. I have seen so much, too much. And there are people out there while I'm talking here and while you're watching this video who are being raped countless times a day. We must stop this, and I'm asking you, share this video with everyone. I don't care. I don't care about the threats I'm getting. I don't care if I'm making myself a fool, because I know it has to stop. I was lucky enough 10 years ago to get away after my sister was murdered because she wanted to talk to a teacher. And I was only able to run away because I didn't have a role model. I took TV shows as my role models, which was Law and Order Special Victim Units that taught me that I'm being abused. Why wasn't there anyone teaching us as children what abuse is, what human trafficking looks like? Why did it have to be a TV show? So, go ahead, share this video, learn something, do something, say something.
So it's time to wake up. There is no more time. How far are we going to let them take us? Are you going to let them take you all the way to hell? Is that it? That's how far? You're not going to stop. You're just going to keep believing and doing everything they say until you're a monster like them, until you're literally formed into their image? Because if you are still a part of this system, of this beast system, then you are still serving Satan. These people, they're priests and teachers and preachers. They are preaching satanic doctrine. the very literal doctrine of demons. I know a lot of us have gotten really loose with it and we think, oh, well, anybody who disagrees with us, that's a doctrine of demons. Or, you know, this denomination against that denomination, they're all Christians, but they disagree about this or that. That's a doctrine. No, God's talking about the doctrine of demons. 1 Timothy 4:1, the Spirit clearly says that in the latter times, some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. These are doctrines of demons, satanic doctrine that has become our culture. And all they had to do was stop calling them priests of the synagogue of Satan and now call them professors, or stop calling them preachers and call them scientists. It doesn't matter what terminology you use. These people are preaching doctrines of demons, convincing us that we should act like demons. And it's time to come out of the system. That's what the Holy Bible says. Come out of her, my people. Come out of Babylon. Come out of her. Turn it off. Don't partake of their sins and you won't partake of their judgment. So you have to come out of their mindset, their mind control. They are forming you into their own image, the image of monsters, the image of the beast system, the image of the beast. That's what it means to worship the image of the beast. Doesn't mean to get down on your hands and knees and wave your arms.
We're not worthy!
Worshiping the beast system, worshiping the image of the beast means that you fell for it. And when I say fell for it, I mean fell. The fallen. You made the choice. You created yourself in the image of the beast. You want to be a sexual pervert. You want to be just like the beast. If you've gotten caught up in these churches who call themselves churches of Jesus Christ, and they're teaching you it's okay that you should go ahead and be conformed to the image of the world instead of conformed to the image of Jesus Christ in holiness, then that's a lie. It's the exact opposite of what God says. They're not preaching God's word then. They're preaching the exact opposite of what God says, because he says in Romans 12:2, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what is God's will, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Do not be conformed to the image of this world. We don't take on their ways and be conformed to the things that people like Kenzie teach. No, God teaches us that we are the salt of the earth. We are the salt and the light. We can't lose our flavor. If we become darkness, then where is the light in the world? No, we are to add the flavor of God to the world, not to take on their flavor. No, we are the salt and the light of the world. Matthew 5:13-16, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So the goal is for us to be the portals of the Holy Spirit, the portal of Jesus Christ, the literal temple of the Holy Spirit, the bodies of God, that we shine light in the world. We show them what holiness looks like. We show them what beauty looks like, not sexual perversion like Kenzie teaches. We show them what Jesus Christ teaches. So if we become darkness and be conformed to their image, what does God say? Then we're not good for anything. And it's more than just your soul at stake here, because if you become conformed to the image of the beast, and then you're preaching that or teaching that or condoning that to your children or to other people in the church, like we see these churches condoning this, then look what they're in danger of. This is what the Bible says, Luke 17:12. It would be better for them to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around their neck than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. Matthew 18:6, if anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. So these people going into these libraries and these kindergarten classes and teaching this to other people's children, people teaching it to their own children, this is what God thinks about it. And God is merciful. Don't get me wrong. Of course he's merciful. He loves everybody. He's suffered a long time watching his children do this stuff, waiting and waiting for us to come to repentance. And I've had a lot of people ask, well, why doesn't God just end it? Well, you know what? It's a good thing I'm not God. If you got nothing else to thank God for, thank him tonight that I'm not God, because I would have already burned the sucker down and started over. But God is merciful and long-suffering. 2 Peter 3:9, the Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some would understand slowness. Instead, he is patient. He is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. And that's the message that I got from the Lord when I was on my face grieving this past week over the crimes of humanity and the lost souls and the wickedness everywhere, the filth and sewer everywhere I look. Repentance. Of course, I couldn't put that in the title. I couldn't put repent, word from the Lord, repent, as the title of this video, because nobody wants to hear that. Nobody would have clicked on the video. It wouldn't have got 16 views. But that's the message. Repent. Yeah, God's long-suffering. He's long-suffering. But the time is up. We've come to the end of this era. We've come to the end of the age of deceit. And this cabal's coming down. And it's not going to be easy. Yes, it says the end of the age is going to bring great tribulation. There's going to be great tribulation as we pull this thing down. But after a few years, then Christ and peace will reign again on the earth. So if you're still following this beast system, whether wittingly or unwittingly, now is the time to come out. We were all deceived at one point. We all had to come out of it. So you're not alone. God's not mad at you. He knows what happened. He wants to save you. But now is the time. Come out of Babylon. Come out of that system. Do not be conformed to their image, to the image of the beast. The Great Awakening has already begun. You've got some catching up to do if you're still in that system. And judgment has been decreed on that system. You think God's going to stay his hand forever? Then you don't know what the word holy means. Holy doesn't mean just merciful. It means whole. He has all of the characteristics of being whole and holy. And one of those characteristics of being holy is being just. He's a God of justice. He's going to stand up for these little children, these little full-term babies who are being massacred. He's going to stand up for these children who are being raped. God is just. He's a God of justice. And people don't want to hear about the justice and the judgment. They just want to hear about the mercy and the grace. But God is holy. His gavel's about to come down. This case in New York against Jeffrey Epstein isn't the first scandal for New York this year. That's what this first part of the Crimes Against Humanity from the Kinsey Institute to New York was about. They're the ones who passed the abortion, they call it abortion, killing full-term babies, cheered and applauded the fact that they are the first to say that killing full-term babies is acceptable. Legalized murder. Full-term human beings that can live on their own outside of the womb. They're like, no, you can still kill them. They're lighting up the Empire State Building, clapping, celebrating. Look at us. We are the first ones to say that murdering full-term babies is okay. So for those of you who think the cabal is more powerful than God, that's a slippery slope, my friend. To say with your mouth you believe our God is the Most High God, but to believe in your heart that Satan is the Most High God and that our God could not possibly judge him. Our God is the Most High God, and he shall judge them. It doesn't matter if Donald Trump does it or doesn't do it. It doesn't matter if some general does it or doesn't do it, or attorney or judge decides to serve justice or to deny justice, because God will raise up another in their place. This is what Amos 5 says about the end of the age for these people, for the people who continue in evil and refuse to repent. The day of the Lord, Amos 5:19. Woe to you who long for the day of the Lord. What will the day of the Lord be like for you? For the unrepentant, for these evil? It will be darkness and not light. And listen to what he says about them trying to escape justice. They will not escape. They are fighting a spirit, the Holy Spirit. They're not fighting a man, Donald Trump. They're not fighting an attorney. They are fighting God, and they shall not escape justice. It says in verse 19, it will be like a man who flees from a lion only to encounter a bear, who enters his house and rests his hand against the wall only to have a serpent bite him. If you think they are going to get away with this, God is waiting for them. If they slip out one way, he's waiting for them at the next turn. Justice will prevail. You continue on in Amos to verse 24. But let justice roll on like a river, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.
We are bored. We're all bored now. But has it ever occurred to you, Wally, that the process that creates this boredom that we see in the world now may very well be a self-perpetuating, unconscious form of brainwashing created by a world totalitarian government based on money, and that all of this is much more dangerous than one thinks, and it's not just a question of individual survival, Wally, but that somebody who's bored is asleep, and somebody who's asleep will not say no? See, I keep meeting these people. I mean, just a few days ago, I met this man whom I greatly admire. He's a Swedish physicist, Gustav Bjornstrand, and he told me that he no longer watches television, he doesn't read newspapers, and he doesn't read magazines. He's completely cut them out of his life because he really does feel that we're living in some kind of Orwellian nightmare now, and that everything that you hear now contributes to turning you into a robot. And when I was at Findhorn, I met this extraordinary English tree expert who had devoted his life to saving trees. Just got back from Washington, lobbying to save the redwoods. He's 84 years old. He always travels with a backpack because he never knows where he's going to be tomorrow. And when I met him at Findhorn, he said to me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "New York." He said, "Ah, New York, yes, that's a very interesting place. Do you know a lot of New Yorkers who keep talking about the fact that they want to leave but never do?" And I said, "Oh, yes." And he said, "Why do you think they don't leave?" I gave him different banal theories. He said, "Oh, I don't think it's that way at all." He said, "I think that New York is the new model for the new concentration camp, where the camp has been built by the inmates themselves, and the inmates are the guards, and they have this pride in this thing they've built. They've built their own prison, and so they exist in a state of schizophrenia, where they are both guards and prisoners, and as a result, they no longer have, having been lobotomized, the capacity to leave the prison they've made, or to even see it as a prison." And then he went into his pocket and he took out a seed for a tree and he said, "This is a pine tree." He put it in my hand and he said, "Escape before it's too late." See, actually for 2 or 3 years now, Chiquita and I have had this very unpleasant feeling that we really should get out. And we really should feel like Jews in Germany in the late 30s. Get out of here. Of course, the problem is where to go, because it seems quite obvious that the whole world is going in the same direction. See, I think it's quite possible that the 1960s represented the last burst of the human being before he was extinguished, and that this is the beginning of the rest of the future now, and that from now on there'll simply be all these robots walking around, feeling nothing, thinking nothing, and there'll be nobody left almost to remind them that there once was a species called a human being, with feelings and thoughts, and that history and memory are right now being erased, and soon nobody will really remember that life existed.
So let's dedicate this to General Kelly, the Border Patrol, and the ICE agents for doing such an incredible job. Right? This was written by Al Wilson a long time ago. And I thought of it having to do with our borders and people coming in and we know what we're going to have. We're going to have problems. We have to very, very carefully vet. We have to be smart. We have to be vigilant. So here it is, the snake. It's called the snake. On her way to work one morning, down the path along the lake, a tender-hearted woman saw a poor, half-frozen snake. His pretty-colored skin had been all frosted with the dew. "Poor thing," she cried, "I'll take you in, and I'll take care of you." The border. "Take me in, O tender woman. Take me in, for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman," sighed the vicious snake. She wrapped him up all cozy in a comforter of silk and laid him by her fireside with some honey and some milk. She hurried home from work that night, and as soon as she arrived, she found that pretty snake she'd taken in had been revived. "Take me in, O tender woman. Take me in, for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman," sighed that vicious snake. She clutched him to her bosom. "You're so beautiful," she cried. "But if I hadn't brought you in by now, oh heavens, you would have died." She stroked his pretty skin again and kissed him and held him tight. But instead of saying thank you, that snake gave her a vicious bite. "Take me in, O tender woman. Take me in, for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman," sighed the vicious snake. "I have saved you," cried the woman, "and you've bitten me, heavens, why? You know your bite is poisonous, and now I'm going to die." "Oh, shut up, silly woman," said the reptile with a grin. "You knew damn well I was a snake before you took me in." Does that explain it, folks? Does that explain it?
Seus Lucifer matutinus inveniat. Ille inquam Lucifer qui nescito casum Christus filius tuus